The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in March of 1883, and Catherine Adelaide's world shattered like dropped china on a hardwood floor. She stood in the parlor of her family's modest home in Manassas, Colorado, her hands trembling as she read the words again, hoping they might somehow rearrange themselves into a different message. But the black ink remained stubbornly cruel. "Cannot marry you. Found another. Please forgive me. Richard." 23 years old and left standing at the altar, metaphorically speaking, though the wedding had been scheduled for just 2 weeks away. The dress hung in her wardrobe upstairs, ivory silk that had cost her father 3 months' wages from his work at the general store. The invitations had been sent. The church had been reserved. And Richard Pemberton, the man she had loved since she was 19, the man who had courted her properly for 4 years, had decided she was not worth the commitment. Catherine sank into her mother's rocking chair, the telegram falling from her fingers to the floor. The morning sun streamed through the lace curtains, making patterns on the rug that seemed offensively cheerful. Outside, she could hear the sounds of Manassas waking up, the clatter of wagons on the dirt road, someone calling out a greeting, a dog barking in the distance. Life continued as though her heart had not just been torn from her chest. Her mother, Martha, found her there an hour later still staring at nothing. Martha picked up the telegram, read it once, and her lips pressed into a thin line. She was a practical woman, hardened by frontier life, but her eyes softened as she looked at her daughter. "Catherine, sweetheart," she said quietly. "He found someone else," Catherine whispered. "In Denver. He found someone else." Richard had gone to Denver 6 months ago to establish a business, a mercantile that would support them once they were married. He had written faithfully at first, long letters full of plans and promises. Then the letters had grown shorter, less frequent. Catherine had told herself he was simply busy, that building a future took time and energy. She had been a fool. "Then he is a fool," Martha said firmly. "A fool and a coward for not having the decency to tell you in person." "Everyone will know," Catherine said, and that thought was almost worse than the heartbreak itself. Manassas was a small town, barely 800 souls, and everyone knew everyone's business. The pitying looks, the whispered conversations, the knowledge that she had been found wanting, it was almost too much to bear. "Let them know," Martha said. "You hold your head high, Catherine Adelaide. You have done nothing wrong. The shame is his, not yours." But shame did not work that way, Catherine thought. Shame spread like spilled ink, staining everything it touched. The next weeks were torture. Catherine had to visit the church to cancel the reservation, had to return gifts that had already arrived, had to endure the sympathetic looks from neighbors and friends. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house patted her hand and said, There, dear. Perhaps it is for the best." Mr. Carlyle from the feed store shook his head and muttered about the declining moral character of young men these days. Sarah Mitchell, who had been Catherine's friend since childhood, cried with her and brought over a chocolate cake that Catherine could not bring herself to eat. Through it all, Catherine felt as though she were moving through water, everything slow and muffled and unreal. She helped her mother with the household chores, she smiled when it was expected, she assured everyone she was fine, just fine. But at night, alone in her room, she let herself feel the full weight of her grief and humiliation. By mid-April, Catherine had decided she could not bear another pitying look. When her father mentioned that the Simmons family, who owned a cattle ranch about 15 miles outside of town, was looking for someone to help Mrs. Simmons with household management and teaching their 3 young children, Catherine volunteered immediately. It would just be for a season, she told her parents over dinner. Mrs. Simmons needs help through the summer while they are dealing with the cattle drives. I could be useful there." Her father, Thomas, exchanged a glance with Martha. They both understood that their daughter needed distance, needed to be somewhere where every street corner did not remind her of walks with Richard, where every storefront did not hold memories of planning a future that would never arrive. "If that is what you want," Thomas said gently. "The Simmons are good people. You would be safe there." So it was settled. On a bright morning in early May, Catherine packed her belongings into a trunk, said goodbye to her parents, and climbed into the wagon that Mr. Simmons had sent to fetch her. As Manasseh disappeared behind her, she felt something loosen in her chest. It was not quite hope, but it was at least the possibility of breathing again. The Simmons ranch sprawled across a valley where the San Juan Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still capped with snow despite the warming weather. The ranch house itself was large and welcoming, built from timber and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around three sides. Mrs. Simmons, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes and flour on her apron, greeted Catherine with genuine warmth. "Oh, my dear, you are an answer to prayer," she said, taking Catherine's hands. "I have been drowning in laundry and lessons and cooking. And Robert, that is my husband, he means well, but he cannot seem to understand that I cannot be everywhere at once." The three Simmons children, 2 boys and a girl ranging in age from 6 to 10, peered at Catherine with open curiosity from behind their mother's skirts. Catherine smiled at them, a real smile this time, not the forced one she had been producing in Manasseh. "I am happy to help however I can," she said. Mrs. Simmons showed her to a small room on the second floor, simply furnished but clean and bright, with a window that looked out over the valley. Catherine unpacked her few belongings, hanging her dresses in the wardrobe and setting her hairbrush and hand mirror on the dresser. She left the wedding dress at home, wrapped in paper, hidden in the back of her closet like a ghost she could not quite lay to rest. The work was hard but satisfying. Catherine rose early to help with breakfast, spent the mornings teaching the children their letters and numbers, and spent the afternoons helping with whatever needed doing: mending, baking, cleaning, preserving. Mrs. Simmons was patient and appreciative, and the children warmed to Catherine quickly. By the end of the first week, she realized she had gone an entire day without thinking about Richard, and the realization was both relieving and sad, like saying goodbye to something she had already lost. It was on a Saturday morning, 2 weeks after her arrival, that she first saw him. She was hanging laundry on the line behind the house, enjoying the warmth of the sun on her face and the smell of soap and fresh air, when she heard the sound of horses approaching. Looking up, she saw a group of cowboys riding in from the eastern pasture, dust rising from their horses' hooves, their hats pulled low against the sun. They were coming in for the midday meal, something that happened every Saturday when the men working the far ranges came back to the main ranch for supplies and a hot meal. Mrs. Simmons had warned Catherine about it, had enlisted her help in preparing enough food to feed a dozen hungry men. Catherine watched them dismount, tying their horses to the rail, and one man caught her attention immediately. He was tall, broad-shouldered, moving with an easy confidence that spoke of someone comfortable in his own skin. When he pulled off his hat to wipe his brow, she saw dark hair and a strong-featured face that the sun had tanned to bronze. He said something to one of the other cowboys, and even from a distance, she could see the white flash of his smile. Then he looked up and saw her watching. For a moment, their eyes met, and Catherine felt something unexpected, a jolt of awareness that made her look away quickly, reaching for another wet shirt to hang. She scolded herself as she worked. She was in no position to be noticing handsome cowboys. Her heart was broken, her trust shattered, and the last thing she needed was to develop some foolish attraction to a ranch hand she did not even know. But when she carried the platters of fried chicken and potatoes out to the long table set up in the shade of the barn, she found herself acutely aware of where he sat, of the sound of his voice as he talked with the other men. "Miss Adelaide, Mrs. Simmons said, pulling her aside as she returned to the kitchen for more bread. "That is Quinn Olson, the one you keep trying not to look at." Catherine felt her cheeks flush. "I do not know what you mean." Mrs. Simmons smiled knowingly. "He is a good man, Catherine. Been working for us for 3 years now. Best horseman we have, and honest as the day is long. He has his own spread, a small place about 10 miles north, but he works here during the busy seasons to earn extra money. He is planning to build it into something substantial." "That is very interesting," Catherine said, trying to sound indifferent. "But I am not looking for anything like that, Mrs. Simmons. My heart is not available." "Perhaps not," Mrs. Simmons said gently, "but hearts have a way of healing when we least expect it. Do not close yourself off to possibilities, my dear." Catherine did not respond, but as she brought the bread out to the table, she found Quinn Olson looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. When she set the basket near him, he said, "Thank you, miss." His voice was deep and warm, and up close, she could see that his eyes were gray like storm clouds. "You are welcome," she managed and fled back to the kitchen. Over the following weeks, Catherine saw Quinn regularly. He was always polite, always respectful, but she noticed he found excuses to be around when she was working outside, helping her carry heavy baskets of wet laundry, fixing a loose board on the porch steps without being asked, bringing fresh milk from the barn when she was baking. The other cowboys teased him about it, not quite loud enough for her to hear the words, but loud enough for her to catch the tone and see Quinn's embarrassed grin. She told herself she should discourage this attention, that she was not ready for anything resembling courtship, that her wounded heart needed more time to heal. But she could not deny that something about Quinn's presence made her feel lighter, made the days seem brighter. One evening in late May, as the sun was setting and painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Catherine was sitting on the porch with her mending when Quinn rode up. He dismounted, hesitated, then approached the porch steps. "Miss Adelaide," he said, holding his hat in his hands. "I was wondering if you might like to take a walk. It is a fine evening." Catherine's first instinct was to refuse, but something in his expression, hopeful and a little nervous, made her set down her mending. "That would be nice," she heard herself say. They walked together toward the creek that ran along the western edge of the property, the air cooling as the sun dipped lower. For a while neither spoke, and it was a comfortable silence, not awkward or forced. Finally, Quinn said, "Mrs. Simmons mentioned you came from Manassas. Do you miss it?" "Sometimes," Catherine said honestly. "My parents are there and I miss them, but I needed some distance for a while." She did not elaborate and he did not press, which she appreciated. "I came out here from Nebraska," Quinn said, "about 5 years ago. My father passed, and my mother remarried a man who had no use for her grown children. I had always wanted to see the mountains, so I headed west." "Do you like it here?" Catherine asked. "I love it," he said simply. "There is something about this land. It is hard and unforgiving sometimes, but it is honest. It does not pretend to be anything other than what it is." They reached the creek, and Quinn picked up a flat stone, sending it skipping across the water, 3 skips before it sank. "Impressive," Catherine said, and was rewarded with his smile. "My brother and I used to have contests," he said. "He always won. He could get 7 or 8 skips easy." "Where is your brother now?" Catherine asked. "Still in Nebraska, as far as I know. We lost touch after I left." There was sadness in his voice, and Catherine understood loss, even if the circumstances were different. They talked as the stars began to appear, about everything and nothing, about favorite books and childhood memories, and what they thought about when they could not sleep. Catherine found herself laughing at Quinn's stories about learning to rope cattle, and the time he fell off his horse in front of the prettiest girl in his Nebraska town. He listened attentively when she talked about teaching the Simmons children and how much she enjoyed watching them understand something new. She did not talk about Richard, and Quinn did not ask. There would be time for painful histories later, if there was a later. For now, it was enough to walk beside this kind man and feel something other than hurt. As they walked back toward the house, Quinn said quietly, "I would like to do this again if you would. Just talk and walk. Nothing more unless you wanted more someday." Catherine stopped, looking up at him in the twilight. His expression was open and sincere, and she realized he was offering her something precious, time and patience and the absence of pressure. "I would like that," she said. "But Quinn, I should tell you, I was engaged. It ended badly. I am not sure I am ready for anything like that again." "I know," he said gently. "Mrs. Simmons mentioned it, and I am not asking you to be ready for anything. I am just asking if I can spend time with you, get to know you better. Whatever else happens or does not happen, we can figure that out as we go." It was the right thing to say, exactly what she needed to hear. Catherine felt some of the tension she had been carrying ease from her shoulders. "Thank you," she said. As June arrived and the weather grew warmer, Catherine and Quinn fell into a pattern. He would finish his work and find her in the garden or the kitchen, or teaching the children under the cottonwood tree, and they would walk together in the evenings, talking about their days and their thoughts and their dreams. Sometimes they would just sit on the porch in comfortable silence while she mended, and he carved small figures from scraps of wood, horses and cattle, and once, a little bird that he gave to Lucy, the youngest Simmons child. Catherine found herself looking forward to these evenings, to Quinn's steady presence and his quiet humor. He never pushed for more than she was willing to give, never tried to kiss her or even hold her hand, though sometimes their fingers would brush when he helped her over a rough patch of ground, and she would feel that spark of awareness that both frightened and excited her. The other ranch hands accepted her presence easily, greeting her politely and complimenting her cooking. But it was clear to everyone that Quinn had staked a claim, not in any possessive or aggressive way, but simply in his obvious admiration and constant attention. Catherine heard one of the older cowboys tell a new hire, "That one is Quinn's girl, so mind your manners," and she was surprised to find she did not mind the designation. In mid-June, a letter arrived from her mother. Catherine read it sitting in her room, her hands shaking by the time she reached the end. Richard had returned to Manassas with his new bride, a Denver socialite named Penelope who wore silk dresses and had never done a day of hard work in her life. They had visited the church to introduce themselves, and Richard had had the audacity to ask Martha to pass along his apologies to Catherine, as though a second-hand sorry could heal the wound he had inflicted. Catherine felt the old hurt rise up, fresh and sharp, and she pressed her hand to her chest as though she could hold the pieces of her heart together through sheer force of will. That evening she was quieter than usual, and Quinn noticed immediately. As they walked toward the creek, he said, "You do not have to tell me, but if you want to, I am listening." So she told him, all of it. About Richard and their long engagement, about the careful planning and the excited anticipation, about the telegram and the canceled wedding and the humiliation of facing the entire town. And now, about his return with his new wife, the final insult added to the injury. Quinn listened without interrupting, and when she finally fell silent, they had reached the creek bank. He picked up a stone, turned it over in his hands, then turned to face her. His loss is my blessing, he said simply. Catherine blinked, not sure she had heard correctly. What? His loss is my blessing, Quinn repeated. If he had married you, I never would have met you. I would not have had these past weeks of walking with you and talking with you and learning that you are brave and kind and funny and smart. I am sorry you were hurt, Catherine. I hate that he caused you pain, but I cannot be entirely sorry that he left, because his leaving brought you here. Tears pricked Catherine's eyes, but they were different from the tears she had shed over Richard. These were healing tears, the kind that washed away old wounds instead of deepening them. I was so angry, she whispered, so hurt and so ashamed. You have nothing to be ashamed of, Quinn said firmly. He is the one who failed, not you. He gave up something precious because he was too foolish to see what he had. How can you be so sure? Catherine asked. You barely know me. I know enough, Quinn said. I know you are patient with children and work hard without complaint. I know you laugh at my terrible jokes and ask me real questions about my life and listen to the answers. I know you care about people, even the chickens you feed every morning. I know you are healing from something that nearly broke you, but you are still here, still trying, still living. That takes courage. Catherine had never thought of her survival as courage. She had simply been putting one foot in front of the other, getting through each day as best she could. But hearing Quinn name it as something strong, something admirable, shifted her perspective. Thank you, she said softly, for seeing me as more than the broken engagement. You are so much more, Quinn said. And someday I hope you will see yourself the way I see you. They stood together as the last light faded from the sky, and Catherine felt something shift in her chest, the first real stirring of hope since that terrible Tuesday in March. As July arrived with its scorching heat, the work on the ranch intensified. It was cattle drive season, and several of the men, including Quinn, would be leaving for a month-long trek to move the herd to the railhead in Alamosa. The night before they left, Quinn asked Catherine to walk with him one last time. They went further than usual, climbing a small hill that overlooked the valley. From here, they could see the ranch house in the distance, its windows glowing with lamplight, and beyond that, the dark shapes of the mountains against the star-filled sky. I am going to miss our evening walks, Quinn said. I will miss them too, Catherine admitted. She had not realized how much these walks had come to mean to her until faced with their absence. Catherine, Quinn said, and something in his tone made her turn to look at him. I want to say something before I go. I know you are still healing and I do not want to push. But I need you to know that these past weeks, getting to know you, they have been the best of my life. Her breath caught. I am falling in love with you, he continued, his gray eyes steady on hers. Maybe I already have fallen, and I understand if you are not ready to hear that. I understand if you need more time or if you never feel the same way, but I wanted to be honest with you before I left, so you knew where I stood. Catherine's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. Part of her wanted to run, to protect herself from the possibility of being hurt again. But a larger part, the part that had been slowly healing through Quinn's patient attention and genuine care, wanted to be brave. I am not ready to say those words yet, she said slowly. But Quinn, I care for you, more than I thought I would be able to care for anyone after what happened. When you are gone, I am going to think about you every day. And when you come back, I would like to keep walking with you, keep talking with you and see where this goes. The smile that broke across Quinn's face was like sunrise, warm and bright and full of promise. That is more than enough, he said. That is everything. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand. His palm was calloused from years of ranch work, his grip gentle but sure. Catherine laced her fingers through his and held on. They stood together on the hilltop, hands joined, and looked out at the valley spread below them. Catherine thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain and humiliation she had endured, and she realized that Quinn was right. If Richard had not broken their engagement, she never would have come to the Simmons ranch. She never would have met this good, patient man who saw her worth even when she struggled to see it herself. "Be safe out there," she said quietly. "I will," Quinn promised, "and I will come back to you." The month that followed was the longest of Catherine's life. She threw herself into her work, teaching the children more advanced lessons now that they had mastered the basics, helping Mrs. Simmons preserve vegetables from the garden, mending clothes and cleaning and cooking. But in the quiet moments, she found herself thinking about Quinn, wondering if he was safe, if he was thinking about her too. Letters were impossible during a cattle drive. No way to send or receive mail in the vast emptiness between the ranch and Alamosa. So Catherine waited and tried not to worry too much, and discovered that the ache in her chest when she thought about Quinn was entirely different from the pain Richard had caused. This was an ache of longing rather than loss, anticipation rather than grief. Mrs. Simmons noticed, of course. One afternoon, while they were baking bread together, she said, "You have fallen for him." It was not a question. Catherine needed the dough, considering denial, but found she did not want to lie. "I think I have," she admitted. "It terrifies me." "Love is terrifying," Mrs. Simmons said. "It means giving someone the power to hurt you. But Catherine, not all men are like the one who left you. Quinn is solid and true. I have known him for years, and I have never seen him be anything but honest and hardworking." "What if I am not ready?" Catherine asked. "What if my heart is still too broken?" "Hearts do not heal in isolation," Mrs. Simmons said gently. "They heal through connection, through letting ourselves care again and be cared for. You have been healing these past months, whether you realize it or not. Quinn has been part of that healing." Catherine thought about this as she shaped the dough into loaves. Perhaps Mrs. Simmons was right. Perhaps healing was not about waiting until you felt entirely whole again before opening yourself up to love. Perhaps healing and loving could happen simultaneously, each supporting the other. The cattle drive returned on a hot afternoon in early August. Catherine was in the garden when she heard the sound of many horses approaching, and her heart leaped into her throat. She stood, brushing dirt from her apron, and saw the cowboys riding in, tired and dusty and grinning with the satisfaction of a job completed. She scanned the group, looking for Quinn, and felt a moment of panic when she did not immediately see him. Then he rode into view, bringing up the rear, and their eyes met across the distance. The smile he gave her was worth every day of waiting, but there was work to be done first, the horses to be tended and the men to be fed. Catherine helped Mrs. Simmons prepare a feast, roasted beef and potatoes and fresh bread and berry pie, and they all sat down to eat together in the golden evening light. Catherine served food and poured coffee, and every time she came near Quinn, she felt his eyes on her, warm and full of promise. Finally, as the meal wound down and the men began to drift off to their bunks or the bunkhouse, Quinn approached her where she was washing dishes. "May I help?" he asked. "You just spent a month driving cattle," Catherine said. "You should rest." "I would rather spend time with you," he replied. So they washed dishes together, their hands occasionally touching in the soapy water, and talked about the drive, about what had happened at the ranch while he was gone, about nothing and everything. When the last dish was dried and put away, Quinn said, "Walk with me." They went to their usual spot by the creek, where the water gurgled over stones and the cottonwood trees rustled in the evening breeze. The setting sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber, and Catherine thought she had never seen anything so beautiful. "I thought about you every day," Quinn said as they stood together on the bank. "Every single day. In the mornings when we were breaking camp, I would think about how you always hum when you are cooking breakfast. In the afternoons when the sun was hot and the dust was thick, I would remember the sound of your laugh. At night, looking at the stars, I would wonder if you were looking at the same sky and thinking of me too. I was, Catherine admitted. I missed you so much, Quinn. I did not realize how much until you were gone. He turned to face her fully, and she could see the dust from the trail still clinging to his clothes, the evidence of hard work and long days. But his eyes were bright and clear, fixed on her with an intensity that made her shiver despite the warmth of the evening. "I love you, Catherine Adelaide," he said. "I know I said it before I left, but I wanted to say it again now that I am back. I love you and I want to build a life with you. I know my ranch is small, just 100 acres and a little house that needs work. But I am planning to expand, to build something substantial. I can provide for you, maybe not with luxuries, but with a good, honest life. If you will have me." Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were entirely happy tears, the kind that came from joy rather than pain. "I love you too," she said, and saying the words felt like stepping into sunlight after a long winter. "I fought it for so long because I was scared. But Quinn, you have been so patient with me, so kind. You have shown me what love should look like, and it looks nothing like what I had before." Quinn reached up and gently wiped away her tears with his thumb. "May I kiss you?" he asked softly. "Yes," Catherine whispered. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to change her mind, and when his lips finally met hers, it was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Catherine felt the last pieces of her broken heart knit back together, stronger now than they had been before, forged through pain into something more resilient. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Quinn rested his forehead against hers and said, "Will you marry me, Catherine?" "I know it is fast, and if you need more time, I will wait. But I want you to know that I am sure. I have never been more sure of anything." Catherine laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Quinn swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing, and when he set her down, he kissed her again, longer this time, deeper, a promise of all the kisses to come. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and when they announced their engagement to the Simmons family, there was much rejoicing. Mrs. Simmons hugged Catherine tightly and whispered, "I told you hearts can heal," and Mr. Simmons shook Quinn's hand and said, "You are getting a treasure, son. Treat her accordingly." "I will," Quinn promised, "every day for the rest of my life." They were married in September, in the small church in Manassas that Catherine had once reserved for a different wedding. Her parents were overjoyed, her mother crying happy tears as she helped Catherine into a new dress, simpler than the one she had bought for Richard, but infinitely more meaningful. Sarah Mitchell stood as her maid of honor, and one of Quinn's cowboy friends from the Simmons ranch stood up with him. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends, but it was perfect. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and Quinn kissed her, Catherine felt nothing but joy and gratitude and love. Richard and his society wife attended, which Catherine learned about only afterward. Her mother mentioned it tentatively, worried it might upset her. But Catherine felt nothing but pity for Richard. He had given up something real and true for whatever shallow connection he had found in Denver. His loss had indeed been Quinn's blessing, and hers too. The reception was held at her parents' home, with tables set up in the yard and food contributed by neighbors and friends. People danced to fiddle music, and Catherine waltzed with Quinn under the September stars, her head resting on his chest, his arms strong and sure around her. "Happy," Quinn murmured into her hair. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Catherine said honestly. They spent their wedding night at a small hotel in Manassas, and the next morning, Quinn drove her in a borrowed wagon to his ranch, to their ranch now. The house was indeed small, just 3 rooms, but it was sturdy and well built, and Catherine could see the potential. There was space for a garden, for chickens, for children someday if God blessed them with any. "It is not much," Quinn said, sounding a little nervous as she explored their new home. "It is perfect," Catherine said firmly. "It is ours, and that makes it perfect." They settled into married life with surprising ease. Quinn continued to work at the Simmons Ranch during the busy seasons, bringing in much-needed income, while Catherine managed their small homestead. She planted a large garden, started a flock of chickens, and began fixing up the house, sewing curtains and braiding rugs and making the simple structure into a home. In the evenings, Quinn would return from work, and they would cook dinner together, talking about their days. After the meal, they would sit on their small porch and watch the sunset paint the mountains, and Catherine would think about how far she had come from that devastated girl reading a telegram in a Manasseh parlor. She wrote to her parents regularly, assuring them she was happy and well. Her mother wrote back with news from town, including the tidbit that Richard and Penelope's marriage was already showing strain. Apparently, Penelope was not adjusting well to frontier life and spent most of her time complaining about the lack of culture and sophisticated society. Catherine felt a moment of vindictive satisfaction at this news, then mostly just pity. Basing a marriage on surface attraction rather than deep connection was a recipe for misery. Winter came, and with it, Quinn's full attention turned to their own ranch. He spent long days working to build up their herd, trading labor with neighbors to build a proper barn, and planning for the spring. Catherine kept the house warm, cooked hearty meals, and mended clothes by lamplight in the evenings. One snowy December night, as they lay in bed with quilts piled high against the cold, Quinn said, "I was thinking, come spring, I would like to start building an addition to the house. Maybe 2 more rooms, one for us as a proper bedroom and one for when children come." Catherine snuggled closer to him, resting her head on his chest. "That sounds wonderful, though you might want to start on that sooner rather than later." Quinn was quiet for a moment, then he propped himself up on his elbow to look at her. "Catherine, are you saying what I think you are saying?" She smiled up at him. "I am with child, Quinn. I have suspected for a few weeks, but I wanted to be certain before I told you." The expression on his face was one of pure wonder. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. Next summer," Catherine confirmed. "July, I think, if my calculations are correct." Quinn kissed her, gentle and reverent, and then he laughed, a sound of such joy that Catherine could not help but laugh with him. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Catherine asked, though she could see the answer written plainly on his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Quinn said. "Catherine, you have given me everything. A home, a purpose, a future, and now a child. I love you so much." "I love you too," Catherine said. "More than I ever thought I could love anyone." They held each other close as the wind howled outside and the snow piled higher, warm and safe and happy in their little house. Quinn started building the addition in early spring, working every spare moment to get it completed before the baby arrived. Neighbors came to help, the frontier tradition of community support making the work go faster. Mr. Simmons sent lumber at cost, and Mrs. Simmons brought over baby clothes her own children had outgrown, washed and neatly folded. Catherine continued her work as long as she could, but as her pregnancy advanced, Quinn insisted she take on less strenuous tasks. He hired a local girl to help with the heavier cleaning and laundry, and he always made sure Catherine rested in the afternoons. "I am not made of glass," Catherine protested more than once. "No, you are much more precious than glass," Quinn would reply, kissing her forehead. "You are carrying our child. Let me take care of you." So Catherine let herself be cared for, and she found she liked it, this feeling of being cherished and protected. It was so different from her relationship with Richard, which had been more about propriety and planning than about genuine affection. With Quinn, everything was real and deep and true. Their son was born on a blazing hot day in mid-July. The labor was long and difficult, attended by Mrs. Simmons and a midwife from Manassas. Quinn paced outside the bedroom, and later, Catherine would laugh about how she could hear his boots wearing a path in the wooden floor. But when the baby finally arrived, his cry strong and healthy, and the midwife brought him out to meet his father, Quinn wept openly. He held his son with such tender care, such obvious love, that the midwife teared up watching him. "What should we name him?" Catherine asked when Quinn brought the baby to her, laying the tiny bundle in her arms. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but had never quite decided. Now, looking at their son's small face, his dark hair and gray eyes like his father's, Catherine said, "What about Thomas Quinn, after my father and you?" "Thomas Quinn Olson," Quinn said, testing the name. "I like it, Tommy." "Hello, Tommy," Catherine whispered to the baby. "Welcome to the world, little one. Your papa and I have been waiting for you." Tommy was a good baby, healthy and strong, with a powerful set of lungs when he wanted something. Catherine and Quinn navigated the exhausting early weeks of parenthood together, taking turns walking the floor with a fussy baby, learning to change diapers and interpret different cries. Catherine's mother came to stay for a month, helping with the household work and teaching Catherine the things only experience could teach about caring for an infant. Thomas Sr. came to visit every weekend, bringing supplies from town and playing proudly with his grandson. By the time Tommy was 3 months old, Catherine felt like she was finding her rhythm. The initial overwhelming exhaustion had eased, and she was able to manage the household and the baby without feeling constantly on the edge of collapse. Quinn had finished the addition to the house, and they now had a proper bedroom and a nursery for Tommy, though most nights the baby still slept in a cradle beside their bed. Life settled into a comfortable pattern. Quinn worked their ranch, gradually building up their cattle herd and improving their land. Catherine managed the household, cared for Tommy, and sold eggs and vegetables in town for extra income. In the evenings, they would sit on their porch with Tommy playing on a blanket at their feet, and they would talk about their dreams for the future. "I want to buy the Peterson property," Quinn said one night. "It borders ours to the north, another 120 acres. Peterson is getting old and wants to move to town. I have been saving, and I think by next year I could make him an offer." "That would nearly double our land," Catherine said. "We could run a much larger herd." "Exactly," Quinn said. "I want to build something substantial, Catherine. Something to pass on to Tommy and to any other children we might have." Catherine smiled. "I would like more children," she said. "Not quite yet. Tommy is only 3 months old. But someday, yes, I would like him to have brothers and sisters." "A house full of children," Quinn said, reaching over to take her hand. "That sounds perfect." 2 years later, Catherine gave birth to a daughter they named Mary Rose. She had Catherine's dark hair and Quinn's gray eyes, and her older brother was fascinated by her. 2-year-old Tommy would sit beside the cradle for hours, watching his baby sister sleep, occasionally reaching out to gently touch her tiny hand. Quinn had successfully purchased the Peterson property, and their ranch was thriving. He had hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work, good men who respected Catherine and adored the children. One of them, a young cowboy named Sam, started courting Sarah Mitchell, Catherine's friend from Manassas, and they were married the following spring. Life was full and busy and happy. Catherine often thought about how different her life had turned out from what she had planned. If Richard had not broken their engagement, she would be living in Denver now, probably in a fine house with nice furniture, attending social events, and trying to fit into a society that valued appearances over substance. Instead, she was here, in a house that had started as 3 rooms and had grown to 6, on a ranch that was becoming one of the most successful in the valley, with a husband who loved her and children who filled her days with joy and exhaustion in equal measure. She would not trade it for anything. One afternoon, when Tommy was 4 and Mary was 2, Catherine was working in the garden when she heard the sound of a wagon approaching. Looking up, she saw her mother and father, but they were not alone. A man sat in the back of the wagon, someone Catherine did not immediately recognize. As they drew closer, her breath caught. It was Richard. He looked older, tired, with lines around his eyes that had not been there 5 years ago. He climbed down from the wagon slowly, and Catherine could see he was favoring his left leg. Her father helped him, looking uncomfortable, and Martha hurried over to Catherine. "I am sorry, dear," she said quietly. "He showed up at the house this morning asking to see you. He said he has something he needs to say. Your father and I thought it was better to bring him here than to have him come on his own." Catherine wiped her hands on her apron, her heart pounding. She had not seen Richard since her wedding day 5 years ago, and she had been perfectly content to never see him again. "What does he want?" "To apologize, he says," Martha replied. "But you do not have to talk to him if you do not want to. We can send him away right now." Catherine looked at Richard, standing awkwardly beside the wagon, and felt nothing but pity. Whatever power he had once held over her emotions was long gone, burned away by the love and happiness she had found with Quinn. "It is all right," she said. "I will hear what he has to say." She walked over to where Richard stood. Up close, she could see he looked genuinely ill, his skin pale, his hands shaking slightly. "Catherine," he said, his voice rough, "thank you for agreeing to see me. I know I have no right to be here." "No, you do not," Catherine agreed. "What do you want, Richard?" He glanced at her parents, then back at her. "I came to apologize. I know it is years too late, and I know it cannot undo the hurt I caused, but I needed you to know that I am sorry. Ending our engagement the way I did through a telegram, it was cowardly and cruel. You deserved better." "Yes, I did," Catherine said. There was no anger in her voice, just simple truth. "Penelope left me," Richard continued, 2 years ago. She went back to Denver, back to her family and their money. The mercantile failed. I lost everything. And I realized that in chasing after what I thought I wanted, wealth and status and a beautiful wife, I gave up something real. I gave up you." He looked at her with such regret that Catherine almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "I heard you married," Richard said. "A rancher, is it true?" "Yes," Catherine said. "His name is Quinn Olson. We have been married for 5 years and we have 2 children." "Are you happy?" Richard asked. Catherine thought about her answer, though she already knew it. "Happier than I ever thought possible. Quinn is a good man, Richard. He is honest and hardworking and kind. He loves me, truly loves me, not the idea of me or what I can bring to his life, but me. He has shown me what a real partnership looks like." Richard flinched as though her words had physically struck him. "I am glad," he said finally. "Truly, I am glad you found happiness. You deserve it." "Why did you really come here?" Catherine asked. "You could have sent a letter if all you wanted was to apologize." Richard was silent for a long moment. "I think I needed to see for myself that you were all right. That I had not ruined your life the way I ruined mine. And maybe I hoped." He trailed off. "Hoped what?" Catherine prompted. "I do not know. That seeing you again would give me some clarity, some sense of what I should do next." Catherine felt a surge of something that was not quite pity and not quite anger. "I cannot help you, Richard. That is not my responsibility. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. I hope you find whatever you are looking for, but you will not find it here." At that moment, Quinn rode up on his horse, returning from checking the north pasture. He dismounted quickly when he saw the wagon and the stranger talking to Catherine, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle on his saddle. "Catherine," he called, his voice carrying a note of concern. "It is all right," Catherine called back. "This is Richard Pemberton. He was just leaving." Quinn's expression shifted from concern to understanding as he recognized the name. He walked over to stand beside Catherine, and she felt his presence like a solid wall of support at her back. Richard looked at Quinn, taking in his height and breadth and the obvious strength of his frame. Then he looked at how Quinn stood close to Catherine, protective but not possessive, and how Catherine leaned almost imperceptibly toward him. "You are the one who married her," Richard said. "I am the one blessed enough to be her husband, yes," Quinn corrected gently but firmly. Richard nodded slowly. "Take care of her," he said. "She is special." "I know," Quinn replied. "And I do every day." Richard climbed back into the wagon with Thomas's help, and Catherine's parents prepared to leave. Martha hugged Catherine tightly and whispered, "Are you all right?" "I am fine, Mama," Catherine said honestly. "He cannot hurt me anymore." As the wagon pulled away, Richard looked back once, and Catherine raised her hand in a small gesture of farewell. Not forgiveness, exactly, but acknowledgement. She had no room in her heart for bitterness anymore. It was too full of love and joy and contentment. Quinn wrapped his arm around her waist as they watched the wagon disappear down the road. "Are you really all right?" he asked quietly. "I am," Catherine said, turning to look up at him. "Seeing him again, I realized something. He does not have any power over me anymore. What we had was not real love, Quinn. I thought it was at the time, but I was wrong. Real love is what we have. Real love is you coming home every night and asking about my day. It is you staying up all night with a sick baby so I could rest. It is building this life together, one day at a time, supporting each other and choosing each other over and over again." Quinn cupped her face in his hands, his calloused thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. "His loss was my blessing," he said, echoing the words he had spoken years ago by the creek. "And it always will be." He kissed her then, slow and sweet, and Catherine kissed him back, pouring all her love and gratitude into the contact. When they pulled apart, she heard the sound of childish laughter from the house, Tommy and Mary playing together. "Come on," she said, taking Quinn's hand. "Let us go see what our children are getting into." They walked together toward the house, their home, the life they had built together. And Catherine thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain and heartbreak that had seemed insurmountable at the time. But she had survived it, had healed from it, and had found something far better on the other side. Sometimes, she thought, the worst things that happen to us are actually the best things in disguise. They force us to change direction, to take a path we never would have chosen, and that path leads us to exactly where we were meant to be all along. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Tommy grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved helping his father with the ranch work. Mary was more adventurous, always climbing trees and chasing after the ranch dogs, her dress perpetually dirty and her hair escaping from its braids. When Tommy was 6 and Mary was 4, Catherine gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named James and Margaret. Quinn was beside himself with joy, telling everyone who would listen that he had been blessed with 4 perfect children. The ranch continued to prosper. Quinn's hard work and smart decisions had paid off, and they were now one of the most successful cattle operations in the region. They employed 6 ranch hands year-round, and Catherine had hired a girl from town to help with the housework and the children. But despite their growing wealth, Quinn and Catherine remained grounded and humble. They remembered the lean early years, the nights when they lay in bed and worried about money, and they were grateful for every blessing. Catherine often invited families from town whose fortunes had not been as kind to come for meals, and she was known throughout the area for her generosity. More than one struggling family had found a basket of food on their doorstep, left anonymously but widely suspected to be Catherine's work. Quinn was equally generous, often hiring men who were down on their luck and giving them a chance to prove themselves. Several of their most loyal ranch hands were men that other ranchers had passed over, but Quinn had seen their potential and given them an opportunity. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinn surprised Catherine with a trip to Denver. Her mother came to stay with the children, and Quinn and Catherine took the train to the city for a week, staying in a fine hotel and attending concerts and eating in restaurants. It was a novelty for Catherine, who had spent the past decade focused on ranch life and raising children. She enjoyed the experience, the culture and sophistication of city life, the beautiful architecture and well-dressed people. But by the end of the week, she was ready to go home. The city felt artificial compared to the honest simplicity of ranch life. She missed her children, missed the sound of the wind through the cottonwood trees, missed waking up to the smell of fresh air and grass instead of coal smoke and crowds. On the train ride home, Quinn said, "Did you enjoy the trip?" "I did," Catherine said honestly. "It was wonderful. But I think I am a ranch wife at heart now. The city is beautiful, but it is not home." Quinn smiled and kissed her temple. "I felt the same way. Though I am glad we went. It is good to see different things, remember how fortunate we are." "I saw Richard while we were there," Catherine said quietly. She had not mentioned it before, not wanting to ruin the trip. Quinn's expression grew serious. "Where?" "On the street, the day you went to look at those new saddles. He was coming out of a saloon and he looked terrible, Quinn. Thin and shabby and old before his time. He did not see me. I did not say anything." "You feel sorry for him?" Quinn asked. Catherine considered this. "I suppose I do a little, but mostly I just feel grateful. Grateful that I did not end up tied to someone who did not really know how to love. Grateful that he left me, so I could find you." "His loss, my blessing," Quinn said for perhaps the 100th time over the years, and it was no less true now than it had been the first time he said it. When they arrived home, the children rushed to greet them, all talking at once about what they had done while their parents were gone. Tommy had helped his grandfather fix a fence. Mary had learned a new song, and the twins had apparently painted themselves and the kitchen in berry juice during an unsupervised moment. Catherine laughed and hugged them all, breathing in the familiar smell of home and children and life, and she thought that she had everything she could ever want right here in her arms. As the children grew older, Catherine and Quinn worked to instill in them the values they held dear. Hard work, honesty, kindness, and gratitude. They taught them to help others, to stand up for what was right, and to never look down on someone simply because they had less. Tommy, as the oldest, took his responsibilities seriously, learning the ranch business from Quinn and preparing to eventually take over. Mary surprised everyone by showing a talent for numbers and bookkeeping, and by the time she was 12, she was helping Catherine manage the ranch accounts. The twins were still young, but James showed signs of being mechanically inclined, always taking things apart to see how they worked, while Margaret had inherited Catherine's love of teaching and was constantly organizing her younger siblings, and the ranch hands children into impromptu classroom sessions. Catherine looked at her children sometimes and marveled at the family she and Quinn had created. Each child was unique, with their own personality and talents, but all of them were kind and hardworking, and she was proud of them. Life was not always easy. There were droughts and hard winters, sick cattle and broken equipment, injuries and illnesses, and the hundred small crises that made up ranch life. But Catherine and Quinn faced each challenge together, supporting each other and emerging stronger. One particularly hard winter, when the children were teenagers, they lost nearly a quarter of their herd to a late blizzard. It was a devastating financial blow, and for a few months, Catherine and Quinn were back to worrying about money the way they had in those early years. But they tightened their belts, worked longer hours, and with the help of their children and loyal ranch hands, they rebuilt. By the following summer, they had recovered most of their losses, and the experience had taught the children valuable lessons about resilience and determination. Catherine's parents passed away within a year of each other when Catherine was in her early 40s. Thomas went first, quietly in his sleep, and Martha followed 6 months later, her heart giving out one morning as she was tending her garden. Catherine grieved deeply for them, but she found comfort in knowing they had lived good, full lives and had been proud of her and the family she had built. She planted a rose garden in their memory, tending it carefully and teaching her daughter Margaret how to prune and care for the bushes. Each year when the roses bloomed, Catherine would cut the most beautiful ones and bring them to the small cemetery in Manassas, where her parents were buried. Quinn's small ranch, which he had bought for almost nothing 20 years earlier, was now a substantial operation covering nearly 500 acres. They had a beautiful house with 8 rooms, a large barn, several outbuildings, and a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. The children each had their own bedroom, and there was even a proper parlor with store-bought furniture and curtains Catherine had sewn herself. But Catherine's favorite place was still the front porch, where she and Quinn would sit in the evenings and watch the sunset. The view never got old, the mountains in the distance, the valley spread before them, the cattle grazing peacefully in the pastures. Sometimes Quinn would pull out his old guitar, the one he had taught himself to play during the long winter evenings of their early marriage, and he would sing old songs while Catherine listened. His voice was not professionally trained, but it was warm and true, and Catherine loved listening to him. On their 20th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a surprise party, inviting friends and neighbors from all over the region. The house was packed with people, and the yard was full of tables laden with food. There was music and dancing, and Tommy gave a speech about his parents that left Catherine in tears. "My father always says that his greatest blessing was my mother's broken engagement," Tommy said, standing tall and confident at 19 years old. "And I have to agree, because without that, none of us would be here. But more than that, my parents have shown us what real love looks like. It is not just the big romantic gestures, though my father still brings my mother wildflowers every week. It is the small things, the daily choices to put each other first, to work together, to support and encourage each other. That is what makes a marriage last, and that is what they have taught us." Catherine looked at Quinn, who was watching their son with pride shining in his eyes, and she thought about how far they had come from that first evening walk by the creek. They had built a life together, a family, a legacy. And it all started because Quinn had seen her worth when she could not see it herself, had been patient when she needed patience, and had loved her when she was barely able to believe in love anymore. After the party, when the guests had all gone home and the children were in bed, Catherine and Quinn walked out to their favorite spot by the creek. It was the same place where Quinn had first told her he was falling in love with her, where he had proposed, where they had returned countless times over the years to talk and plan and simply be together. 20 years, Catherine said, leaning against Quinn's chest as his arms wrapped around her from behind. It feels like no time at all, and yet I can barely remember my life before you. 20 of the best years of my life, Quinn said. And I am looking forward to 20 more and 20 after that. We will be very old, Catherine said with a laugh. Then we will be very old together, Quinn replied. I cannot imagine anything better. They stood together in the moonlight, listening to the creek and the night sounds, and Catherine thought about the girl she had been, heartbroken and humiliated, reading a telegram that felt like the end of the world. If she could go back and tell that girl what the future held, the love and joy and fulfillment that awaited her, would she believe it? Probably not. Sometimes the best things in life were impossible to imagine until they happened. But she would tell that girl this. Broken engagements and shattered dreams sometimes lead to better paths than we could have found on our own. Trust that healing is possible. Trust that love can find you when you least expect it. And trust that what feels like an ending might actually be the beginning of the best part of your story. The years continued to unfold with their mix of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. Tommy eventually married a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch, and they built a house on the northern section of the property, close enough to help with the family business but far enough to have their own space. They gave Catherine and Quinn 3 grandchildren in quick succession, 2 girls and a boy. Mary, true to her independent spirit, decided she wanted to see more of the world before settling down. With her parents' blessing and money she had saved from managing the ranch accounts, she traveled to San Francisco and spent 2 years there, working as a bookkeeper for a shipping company. When she returned, she brought with her a quiet, serious man named David who was a lawyer, and they were married in the same church where Catherine and Quinn had exchanged their vows. The twins, James and Margaret, remained close as they grew older. James took over the mechanical maintenance of the ranch, keeping all the equipment in good repair, and even inventing a few improvements that made various tasks easier. Margaret did eventually become a teacher, opening a small school on the ranch property that served the children of their ranch hands and several neighboring families. Quinn's hair turned silver, and Catherine's dark locks gained threads of white, but they remained healthy and active well into their 60s. They scaled back their direct involvement in running the ranch, letting Tommy take over more of the day-to-day operations, but they were still vital parts of the business and the family. Catherine started writing down her memories, filling journal after journal with stories from her life. She wrote about growing up in Manassas, about the pain of Richard's betrayal, about meeting Quinn and falling in love, about the births of her children and the growth of the ranch. She wrote about lessons learned and faith tested, and joy discovered in unexpected places. One evening, as she was writing by lamplight in the parlor, Quinn came to sit beside her. "What are you working on?" he asked. "I am writing about the day we met," Catherine said. "Do you remember? I was hanging laundry and you rode in with the other cowboys." "I remember," Quinn said with a smile. "I thought you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. You had flour on your nose and your hair was coming out of its pins, and you looked exhausted but you were smiling anyway." "I did not have flour on my nose," Catherine protested, laughing. "You did," Quinn insisted. "And when you caught me staring, you looked away so fast I thought you might drop the laundry basket." Catherine set down her pen and turned to face him. "I was scared," she admitted. "Scared of feeling anything for anyone after Richard." "But you were so patient with me, Quinn. You gave me time to heal and you never pushed." "I would have waited as long as it took," Quinn said simply. "You were worth waiting for." Even after 40 years of marriage, his words still had the power to make her heart flutter. Catherine reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together, and marveled at how their hands had aged together, both showing the marks of hard work and long years, but still fitting perfectly. "His loss truly was your blessing," Catherine said softly. "And mine, too. If Richard had not left me, I never would have come to the Simmons Ranch, never would have met you, never would have had this life." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened?" Quinn asked. "If he had not sent that telegram." Catherine considered this. She had not thought about Richard in years, had not wondered about his life or what had become of him. That part of her past felt distant and unimportant, like a story she had read once but could barely remember the details of. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but not with any regret. I think I would have been miserable, Quinn. Richard did not love me, not really. He loved the idea of a suitable wife, someone to fit into his plans. But he never knew me, never tried to really understand who I was. With you, from the very beginning, you saw me. You valued my thoughts and opinions, you made me laugh, you supported my dreams. That is real love." Quinn brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You made me a better man," he said. "Before I met you, I was content with just surviving, working hard and saving money and building my ranch. But you taught me that life is about more than that. It is about connection and family and building something meaningful together." They sat together in comfortable silence, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the mantel and the occasional pop from the fire burning low in the fireplace. Outside, they could hear the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night, the last calls of birds, the distant lowing of cattle, the wind rustling through the trees. This was home, Catherine thought. Not the house, though she loved every room and every piece of furniture they had collected over the years. Not even the land, though it was beautiful and they had worked so hard to make it productive. Home was this, sitting with Quinn in the evening, their hands joined. Their lives so thoroughly intertwined that she could not imagine one without the other. As they moved into their 70s, Catherine and Quinn finally stepped back completely from ranch operations, though they still lived in the main house and loved being involved with their grandchildren. Tommy ran the ranch with efficiency and care, implementing new techniques while respecting the foundation his parents had built. The ranch now employed 12 full-time hands and several part-time workers during busy seasons. It was a substantial operation, providing good livings for many families, and Catherine and Quinn were proud of what they had created. Not just the financial success, but the community they had fostered, treating their employees with fairness and respect, helping families when times were hard, and creating a place where people wanted to work. Catherine's health began to decline when she was 74. It was nothing dramatic, just the gradual wearing down that came with age. She tired more easily, her joints ached in the mornings, and some days she did not feel like getting out of bed. But she still had good days, days when she felt almost like her younger self, full of energy and joy. On those good days, she would bake with her granddaughters, teaching them her recipes and telling them stories about when she was young. She would sit on the porch with Quinn, his arm around her shoulders, and watch the sun set over the mountains. She would work in her rose garden, though she could not kneel for as long as she used to, and she would write in her journals, wanting to capture every memory before they faded. Quinn was tireless in his care for her. On her bad days, he would bring her breakfast in bed and read to her from the newspapers. He would help her into the rocking chair by the window so she could watch the ranch activity. He would tell her she was beautiful, even when she felt old and tired and far from the young woman he had married. "You are still the most beautiful woman in the world to me," he would insist when she protested. "You are biased," Catherine would reply, but she loved him for saying it anyway. One warm evening in late summer, Catherine felt well enough to walk out to the creek with Quinn. It was slow going, her steps much slower than they used to be, but Quinn matched his pace to hers, patient and steady as always. They sat on the bank where they had sat so many times before, where their story had really begun, and watched the water flow past. The cottonwood trees had grown taller over the years, their shade deeper, but the creek burbled over the same stones, and the mountains rose in the same majestic silhouette against the sky. "I want you to know something," Catherine said, taking Quinn's hand. "These years with you, this life we built together, it has been more than I ever dreamed possible. You gave me a family and a home and a love that never wavered. I have been so happy, Quinn, so very happy." "Why does this sound like a goodbye?" Quinn asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Not yet," Catherine said, squeezing his hand. "But someday, probably sooner than either of us wants to admit, and when that day comes, I do not want you to be sad for too long. I want you to remember the joy we had, not the sorrow of losing it." "I will be devastated," Quinn said honestly. "You are my whole heart, Catherine. You always have been." "And you are mine," Catherine said. "But we have had 50 wonderful years, Quinn. 50 years of love and laughter and building this beautiful life. That is more than most people ever get. We have been blessed." Quinn pulled her close, and they sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red and purple. Catherine rested her head on his shoulder and thought about all the sunsets they had watched together, all the evenings they had spent by this creek, talking and planning and simply being together. She had no regrets. Her life had taken a path she never could have anticipated, but it had been a good path, a path that led to love and fulfillment and joy. The broken engagement that had once seemed like the end of the world had actually been a gift, pushing her toward the life and the love she was meant to have. "His loss was my blessing," Quinn murmured, as though reading her thoughts. "And mine," Catherine added. "The greatest blessing of my life was you, Quinn Olson, you and the family we made together." They sat until the stars came out, until the night air grew cool and Quinn insisted they head back to the house. He helped her to her feet, and they walked together through the twilight, their steps slow but their hands firmly joined, just as they had been for 50 years. Catherine lived 2 more years, years filled with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, with laughter and love and the quiet contentment that came from a life well lived. When she passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 76, Quinn holding her hand, the entire community mourned. The church in Manassas was packed for her funeral, standing room only, as people came from all over the region to pay their respects to a woman who had touched so many lives with her kindness and generosity. Quinn grieved deeply, the loss of his beloved wife leaving a hole in his heart that would never fully heal. But he remembered what Catherine had said by the creek that evening, about remembering the joy rather than dwelling in the sorrow. So he kept living, staying active with the ranch and his family, telling stories about Catherine to anyone who would listen, making sure her memory remained vivid and alive. He lived another 5 years, years in which he saw the ranch continue to prosper, saw his grandchildren grow into fine adults, and saw the legacy he and Catherine had built continue to flourish. When his own time came, he went peacefully, sitting in his rocking chair on the porch with a view of the mountains he had loved and the land he and Catherine had built together. Tommy found him there, a smile on his face, and they buried him beside Catherine in the Manassas cemetery, under the shade of a spreading oak tree, with the mountains visible in the distance. The ranch continued through the generations, each one building on the foundation Quinn and Catherine had laid. The story of how they met, how a broken engagement had led to a blessed marriage, became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren. And in the family archives, Catherine's journals remained, carefully preserved, documenting a life transformed by heartbreak into something beautiful. The final entry, written just weeks before her death, read, "I think often about that telegram, arriving on a Tuesday morning so many years ago, shattering my heart and my plans. At the time, it felt like the worst thing that could possibly happen. But now, looking back over the life I have lived, I see it as the moment everything began. Richard's rejection pushed me out of Manassas and led me to the Simmons Ranch, where I met Quinn. And Quinn, my dear, patient, wonderful Quinn, loved me back to life. He showed me what real love looked like, and together we built something beautiful. So I am grateful in the end for that terrible telegram, because his loss truly was my blessing, and it gave me the most wonderful life I could have ever imagined." The legacy of Catherine and Quinn's love lived on, not just in the ranch they built or the family they raised, but in the example they set. They showed that heartbreak does not have to be an ending, that love can find us in unexpected places, and that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best chapters of our story. Their tale became a testament to resilience, to second chances, and to the transformative power of true love that sees us, values us, and chooses us every single day.